This is FE Peer Review. The date is February the 3rd, 2024. Exploring the plane is wrong. Surprise! Euclidean geometry works. This is one of those videos which is a response to a response to a response to a response, etc. It all started with Bob the Science Guy having a conversation with Caleb, and then Bob made a few videos out of that which were very entertaining. I think I covered them already. Well, Tommy Grunwald has made his own response to Bob's and Caleb's video, and I will put a link to it in the description. I enjoyed the video very much. Nice to see Tommy Grunwald putting something out there again. And then in the comments, Exploring the Plane responded to Tommy Grunwald, "Unbelievable! I explained this to you countless times in your previous video. If vision is not Euclidean, then we cannot use Euclidean geometry, such as trigonometry, to make measurements and predictions in models. We cannot use trigonometry. This means that most of your videos are null and void. That's how much of a difference it makes. Go back and read the thread from last time." Well, okay, so here's my response to Exploring the Plane. I had two responses, and I'll read them both, and we'll look at a few little pretty pictures. Space is whatever it is, regardless of how we see it. The geometry of space is what it is, regardless of whether or not we measure it. I've got fence posts at each corner of my property. If I take a measuring tape and stretch it between the two of them, it gives me a specific measurement. It doesn't matter what direction I look at it from. That measurement remains the same. My profession was architecture and structural engineering. I learned to draw 1, 2, and 3-point perspectives, as well as isometric views and the usual plans, sections, and elevations of objects. I should interject here. I learned all that before computer drafting was available. It was all manual at that time. I use computers for most of it now. All these are just different ways of describing the actual geometry of objects. And for a person who understands the drawing conventions, they can extract from those drawings a correct understanding of the actual geometry of the object depicted. This means that they can then, without reference to the building itself, create new building elements intended to fit in with the existing building. These elements can be fabricated, and then when put into position, they are a practically perfect match to the building itself. In short, the drafting conventions are thereby validated as correct depictions of the reality of the object they depicted. Our use of Euclidean geometry allowed us to measure the object, obtain a record of its true geometry, and then to predict that the new object we were designing to fit with it would accurately do so. This is a copy of an original drawing of a structural element in the Golden Gate Bridge at San Francisco. What we're seeing is an elevation view of a steel frame. We've got a kind of a beam going across. We're only showing half of it. The center line is where I'm moving my mouse. We have a beam that goes across and then a column at the end and a diagonal brace. We've also got on the sheet here a few sections through various related parts. And what we're looking at is, there's the bridge. So I've got my mouse here. You can see my mouse. There's a leg, a column, and then the beam is under the bridge deck. The beam goes across, comes down and rests on another column. And then you can see a diagonal brace there. And there are diagonal braces on the other side as well. So that drawing we're looking at is one of these frames. It's called a frame, and it's 2 columns and a beam. So this entire bridge was designed on paper with people back in the mid-1930s using pencils and manual drafting equipment and Euclidean geometry. They didn't bother with doing perspectives on a job like this except as presentation work, but for construction, all of the drawings would have been orthographic or possibly isometric. We don't see in isometric views, by the way, and we don't see in orthographic views, and yet we can measure this. We can measure space thousands of feet from one point of land across a body of water to another point of land, we can then use orthographic drawing conventions to fabricate thousands and thousands of structural elements which are fabricated in steel shops. And then all of these pieces are brought together and placed one next to the other, and everything fits. It all fits. The validation of the method is that the bridge got built. We connected one point of land to the other point of land, and everything was where we expected it to be. Here's a little article from Arch Daily, Architecture Daily. 10 historical museum buildings with contemporary additions. We're not going to look at all 10, but I thought I'd scroll down to this one here. The first one, British Museum. In the year 2000, Sir Norman Foster, architect in London, one of the great architects of our time, designed an addition to the British Museum. Now, the original building you can see on either side, classical structure, Ionic porticos built in stone. And this was an open-air courtyard, this whole space. Foster designed this central pavilion and a roof over the whole thing to enclose it. That roof comes down and rests on a series of small steel connectors. You can see where I've got the mouse. One there, one there, one there. There's a bunch on the other side. They go all the way around. And all of these triangles creating this amazing convoluted shape were all defined through the use of Euclidean geometry. They were all fabricated in a steel shop somewhere. All these triangular panes of glass were drafted using Euclidean geometry, fabricated in a glass shop somewhere, and all the pieces were put together and they fit within the real geometric context. So it worked. There's another one that worked. And another one. Not sure if it exactly looks like it worked, but that's what they intended it to look like. This is all done using Euclidean geometry, using Euclidean space, using human eyes. Now this stuff was all drafted using computers. This is the age of CAD, but the Golden Gate Bridge was not. Anyway, I've rambled on. Now I think my point is clear. Exploring the plane is wrong. We can describe space accurately and correctly using Euclidean geometry. And the proof is, as they say, in the pudding. You know what to do. There's a like button down there and a subscribe button as well. You all have a great day. Bye-bye.